Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is the Passion of the Christ of Clermont-Ferrand, or La Passion du Christ de Clermont-Ferrand. Just to start by explaining what the image isn't from the manuscript. I was going to use the top part of the first column of the first page of the manuscript as an image, but it's actually one of the ones that's most difficult to read. It's the one that's got the most marks, the most ink marks or dirt marks. So this, as you can see, I have labelled it. It's from the Peterborough Psalter, circa 1220. Circa means roughly F. If you ever see F12R, F is for folio. 12R, R is recto, which is the first side you write on. So 12R recto, 12V verso, the other side. So moving on to the text itself, the text is reckoned to be from about 980. And the interesting part, the controversial part about this text is what language is it actually written in? Is it in Old French or is it in Old Occitan? And that depends on the source. A lot of dictionaries I see that quote it, because I read a lot of etymological dictionaries and Old French dictionaries. A lot of them quote it as the first use of such and such a word in Old French, first used circa 980 in the Passion. The one particular source I found that calls it Old Occitan is the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, or BNF, called BNF for short, which refers to the manuscript itself as being in this part of it, this excerpt from the manuscript, as being in Old Occitan. My particular interest in it is I tried to find a transcription of this, a modern transcription of this, and I couldn't find one. Therefore, the manuscript was, the images of the manuscript are publicly available, so I started working on my own. Therefore, I've spent a good 20 or 30 hours on this thing. Subsequently, I have found one. I have found a transcription of it. So in a sense, that was wasted time, but the positive side of it was I knew the text in a lot of detail. I kind of know, or I knew at the time at least, what's in, all, because it's 3 columns per page, 4 pages, so I used to know what was in all of the columns. One thing with it being the Passion of the Christ is it does help when you already know what the story is. In terms of if there's an ambiguous word or ambiguous writing or whatever, the fact that it is probably the best known story of the last 2,000 years does mean that trying to work out the meaning of a word, it does help that you already know what the story is. So now if we move on and we have a look at, basically it's far too long, so I've picked out an excerpt, and it's an excerpt from the 4th folio, the 4th page, and it's at the bottom of the 2nd column, so it's very near the end. It's basically a few lines short of the end. And the transcription, I should say, is mine. I have found the Gaston Paris transcription from 1873. I have read that, but this is my transcription that I've done, having spent enough time with the text, I've done it. And there's all sorts of things you can say about this. First of all, look how I've put spaces in. Look at the first line, Lo Satanus dol on at grant. So there's really the last 3 words, there's no spaces at all, and I've put all of those in. Second thing, second line, and throughout, look at the last letter is a Z, afants. Afants. Took me ages to work out what that was. I had to look it up. It's a version of ahan, which means trial, suffering, that sort of thing. Moving on to lines 3 and 4, you can see AR endings for infinitives. So, alcance en crus fe los levar. And the line below that, line 4, degollar. That's obviously good evidence for it being Old Occitan and not Old French, because Old French doesn't have AR endings for its infinitives. Another similar feature we can see is line 4, alcance d'espadas degollar. espada has an A in the middle. It's épée. So épée, it's the old French. Épée, modern French. In this one we can see it's espadas. It's got an A in the middle. Line 5, Elos alcance fe escorter. If you compare that T with Satanus above, it does seem to say escorter, not escorcer. But a sensible correction would be escorcer, which would mean to skin. So that's an example of when we can read what it says in the manuscript and make what we think is a sensible correction, what was the intention. And sometimes it's just ambiguous, or in this case you could say it's ambiguous, or you could say it's a sensible correction. So lines 6 and 7, we can see that I've put the hyphens in. We can see another good example of V and U being the same letter being written in an identical way. Alcance en fog, vius, trebuchere, vius, which is the French vif, lively, Latin vivus, vius. The U and the V are written identically. Below that, one line below that, we've got graduli. I put the space in, so en graduli lus fetoster. There's no space, so it seems like it says graduliels, but I've followed Gaston Paris, what he's done, and it's les, that is les, the modern French article. Without the E's been elided, and I've followed him on this. But again, it's a good example of how it is a matter of an interpretation. You can write it out verbatim with no space, or you can try and make sense of it and say, well, actually, the scribe isn't using spaces very consistently in this manuscript. I'm going to put one in. And the last line is written over 2 lines. That is all line 8 of Ix, so not line 8 overall. So what can we say? It's got an ampersand in the middle of a word. So alcance ap petrus lapidaire. So first thing to say is how do we transcribe that? I've left the ampersand in. You could do P-E-T-D-R-E-S. You could say, well, it's clearly not pronounced like that, so I'm going to do P-E-D-D-R-E-S. Also, we can comment on the ap petrus, which is, we're talking about stone. Ap petrus. The ap is clearly to, the French word a, Old French, archaic Old French ad. So why is it P? Probably it's a sort of Provençal thing, an old Occitan thing, and AD becomes AP before following P. So just to go through a few of the difficult words that don't exist in modern French. We've covered offense, which is trial, tribulation, that sort of thing. Espada, we've covered, that's épée. Dégolar is to slit the throat, basically. Escorcer or escorter is to skin alive. Gradulia is grill, so he toasted them on a grill. And at Petrus lapidaire, well, lapidaire, obviously, we know. So that's the last example, and that's to stone.